In today's Big Finish audio drama review, we travel back to London in 2005 as I take a look at the latest volume in the Torchwood 1 spin-off series entitled Nightmares. This release is available to order now on the Big Finish website. The physical CD is £19.99 and the download is £16.99, and it can also be purchased as part of a bundle with the other Torchwood 1 releases, although do note it will be going up to the standard recommended retail price at the end of June 2022. So this is the fourth volume of the Torchwood 1 series, and I've absolutely loved this series so far. There's something about this Torchwood 1 team which really gels with me, making them a really enjoyable listen, so I was very excited to see this series continue and have a brand new volume. So this series is entitled Nightmares, and basically it's an encompassing theme, where all three stories throughout the set do different things, but all relate to the concept of memory and the mind, and how the mind can be affected by certain experiences. And naturally, of course, as we've seen through Torchwood at Big Finish, Torchwood is a very stressful form of employment, which leads to implications. So taking a look at the stories for this set, the first episode is My Guest Tonight, as written by Tim Foley. The second episode is Lola, as written by Roshana Patel. And the third and final episode of the set is Less Majesty, as written by James Goss. So before we get into the actual contents of the episodes themselves, I'd also just like to mention that this release does contain adult material, including some strong language, violence, and some adult themes which will not be suitable for younger listeners. Well, you know you're in for a rough ride when episode 1 of a 3-part box set entitled Nightmares is written by Tim Foley, and I say that in the kindest possible way, as Tim Foley has penned some of the strongest Big Finish audio dramas that I've frankly ever listened to, and when he does spooky, he has a habit of being able to do it so very well. My Guest Tonight is an unsettling commentary on people in the public eye, in particular chat show hosts. And when Yvonne Hartman is brought onto TV for the whole country to see, to talk about the country's highly classified organisation known as Torchwood, you know there is going to be problems. The narrative of this story is quite a jumpy one. It's a hallucinogenic dreamscape of uncertainty and horror. Tim Foley uses gore and blood in such a measured, careful way, which is one of the highlights of this story for me as a listener. It's unexpected and certainly makes an impact. The story does definitely feel like it is torturing one of its main characters throughout. It's one of those episodes where you kind of start it not quite sure what is going on, and as you reach the midpoint you kind of start to see the plot points coming together. This is one of those episodes that I definitely recommend just sticking with it, listening to it throughout, and seeing what journey this episode takes you on, because it's very emotional, quite depressing, quite bleak, but also very gritty and exciting at the same time. We all know John Culshaw as an incredibly talented impressionist, but this episode highlights just how good of an actor he is without impersonating another celebrity. Here he plays a chat show host known as Nigel Best. Throughout the story, we get inside his head, how he interacts with the guests on his show, as well as digging into his past. Frankly, it's traumatic, and I can't say why without giving away too much. It's all about personality and character. The way those people in power use their personalities when interacting with others, and how such people get into the role that they do, even choosing their path in life at a very early age. And then we have the acting powerhouse that is Tracy Ann Oberman as Yvonne Hartman. I love Yvonne, I hate Yvonne, she's evil, she's lovely, and she's sinister. This episode kind of edges towards the more sinister, omnipotent characteristic. We don't have the usual other Torchwood members throughout this story in the way that you would expect, so this episode does very much feel like one of her Torchwood main range outings. You get that brilliant sense of power and authority from the character, and Tracy and John play off each other with a brilliant dynamic. Yvonne is almost like a ghostly figure, an apparition popping in every so often into Nigel's life to see if he's done his job correctly yet, or if he's made the right decisions. I did worry that this volume of Torchwood 1 was simply playing all of its cards for the first story, delivering a bizarre but brilliantly strong tale. However, I think my guest tonight is simply just the beginning of an incredibly strong box set, which does some absolutely brilliant things. I think in the context of this episode, enjoyable perhaps isn't the best choice of words, but it is certainly a very memorable listen. Episode 2 is Lola. This story continues to explore the depths of the human mind, but this time in relation to personal memories and what happens when experiences are gained and taken away from individuals. The Torchwood 1 series isn't a series which shies away from the stresses of being employed at Torchwood. We've had episodes in the past which have dealt with this concept to the extreme, whilst Lola uses the memories of the employees who surround the Torchwood workspace to create a rather vulnerable set of individuals. Unlike episode 1, this story returns to the more familiar setting of Torchwood 1 based in Canary Wharf. We see the reprisal of Yanto Jones, this time in his early years of working at Torchwood, as well as the brilliant Tommy as played by Timothy Bentinck. Tommy is such an interesting character. Part of the old guard, he belongs to another generation. Unlike the tech whizzes employed in Torchwood today, he's a strong northern character with a mindset of how things should be. At times he could be considered rude and old-fashioned, but this makes for a great twist in dynamics, making the Torchwood team seem somewhat normal and realistic. Timothy is a delight to listen to. Each script really brings the character alive, and I love how this episode starts to dig into his past a little bit more, in ways that I'm not going to entirely reveal throughout this review. Yanto Jones is still learning the ropes at Torchwood and ultimately wants to be liked by everyone, so he summons the help of the scientist known as Kaylee when he thinks things are going a little bit wrong. And all of this starts with suspicion from one dirty coffee cup. I find it really intriguing how this set of stories use the mind to play tricks on people, drawing on not only their weaknesses but also their strengths. So far both episodes have explored the mind in very different ways. This story feels like a proper traditional Torchwood one, salvaging alien tech that they have no idea what it does, and then letting whole chaos ensue from that moment onwards. Torchwood never seems to learn from its mistakes. Yvonne Hartman's Torchwood world is the most corporate the organisation gets, whilst also remaining a tad amateur at the same time. Torchwood always has concerns of corruption and trust at its heart, and this episode explores that in great detail, showing how basically anyone and everyone can stab each other in the back. It's also always nice to be introduced to a new member of the Torchwood team. Kaylee is a bright individual excellently played by Blythe Jando. She works really well alongside Yanto, but also is underestimated by the employees around her. She brings a thoroughly enjoyable emotional element to the story, whilst also paving the way for the bright younger members of Torchwood. I hope that we get to see more of her in the future, in the next releases of Torchwood 1. This is certainly the more safe story of the set narrative-wise, but considering that, it actually stands up really well alongside the other stories within the set, making for another enjoyable listen. James Goss concludes the box set with Less Majesty, an episode that quite frankly had me cackling throughout. Yvonne Hartman wakes up in a mysterious hotel in bed with the heir to the throne, except he's dead with a knife sticking out of his back. She calls on Yanto for assistance, not knowing how or when she got to the hotel, and most importantly, what shall be done about the dead heir to the throne that is laid beside her. In reaction to these rather unusual circumstances, it has to be said, Yanto calls on Tommy for what is possibly the setup to one of my personal favourite Torchwood outings of all time. The trio find themselves together in a hotel room with a dead royal and an imminent groundbreaking speech that shall save Torchwood through additional funding. But how shall the speech be done when the royal is dead? This episode is absolutely hilarious. It's pretty much a three-hander with the occasional side character coming in to spruce up the action. For those who are familiar with stage performances, this episode is a bedroom farce. It's a concept that I had absolutely no idea about before going into this story, and having finished the episode, I'm still not quite sure the whole technique and the ins and outs of it, but what I do know is I really enjoyed the way that it was presented throughout this audio drama. Goss without fail delivers many hilarious moments, dark humour and outright silliness. Timothy Bentinck, Gareth David Lloyd and Tracy Ann Oberman absolutely excel. All three characters are so different in their approach to life, which makes for even more confusion when there is a need to tackle a dead body. To make matters more complex, Tommy brings along a new Torchwood trial drug known as Calmy Calm, which once more allows for some absolutely cracking bits of dialogue which divides up the narrative and progresses the story forward, as well as being absolutely hilarious. It's kind of like Calm in scenes of absolute chaos. For another 1 hour story, this episode absolutely flies by and is a great presentation at how the various minds within Torchwood work, tackling mistrust, emotions running high, and how the mind can play tricks on you. This set of stories carries such an incredible range of story style, with bleak horror nightmarescape adventures, but then also ending off with a comedy that practically had me in tears of laughter. As the team attempt to solve the problem, matters are made worse by unexpected problems, jokes, and very insistent room service. I'd absolutely love for this story to be an actual stage production. I don't know if it's just my personal perspective when it comes to jokes, but I think that James manages to somehow keep gags going throughout the entirety of the story's narrative without them getting boring. He has an excellent talent, and a big thumbs up to the production team for making this episode work so well within the audio drama format. If you are a fan of more light-hearted Torchwood stories with a darker underlying theme, then this one is most certainly for you. It's a perfect way to end this set and has most certainly left me wanting more from this Torchwood team without a doubt. And that is one of my main critiques of this series overall. I love Torchwood 1 and I would love to see it become a regular series at Big Finish, with maybe a scheduled outing, maybe once or twice a year, because I think this team really do excel. They can do lots of different stories, incredibly serious, incredibly bleak, very hard hitting, but also very funny stories as well. All of the volumes so far within this series have carried so much variety, and I look forward to each and every release. So there we have it, that is my review of Torchwood 1 Nightmares. I really hope you have enjoyed it. Something of which that I would like to mention before finishing off this review is that regardless if you haven't listened to the previous volumes within this series so far, that does not matter. You can listen to any of the volumes of this series out of order. They don't really follow a plot arc or anything like that. And to be honest, if you are looking to get into an area of Torchwood that is brand new and different, then Torchwood 1 is most certainly a series that I recommend. It is definitely some of the strongest Torchwood content that Big Finish produce. So thank you very much for watching this review, have a nice day, and I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.